Good evening. I have it 7:15. We will call this meeting into session. First up, I'd like to ask if our county administrator would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Thank you. If you could rise if you're able, we'll start with a moment of silence and then I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Meadows, first up, presentation, recognitions, and awards. Presentation of proposed FY24 county budget.
Thank you very much, Chair Bill Evans. Good evening, everyone. It's always interesting to be down here in the audience. It's more relaxed down here than it is up there. But I do want to share with you the fiscal year 2024 budget message. I'm not going to read the entire message to you this evening. I'm going to read a lot of it, but I'm not going to read all of it. I think it's being passed out if you don't have it already. I will start with tonight's session is the presentation of the budget. Then when I'm completed my part, Angie Hill is going to go through some of the numbers in a little bit more detail. The plan this evening is not to have an in-depth discussion or really any discussion of the budget this evening. It's an opportunity to present this information to you. Next Monday night, we will be having a work session that begins at 6 o'clock to talk about the budget in more detail. I'll reference that in my budget message. And then hopefully at the end of that work session next Monday evening, the board will be ready to set an advertised tax rate and budget. That is not necessarily what you adopt. It just is the maximum amounts related to the property tax rate in the budget. Dear honorable members of the Board of Supervisors, I am pleased to present to you the proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 Montgomery County budget for your review and consideration. The proposed budget outlines the county's fiscal plan of operations for the upcoming year and was developed by our leadership team to meet the current and future needs of the county. Our county organization has remained steadfast over the past year, even as we have continued to face challenges from the COVID-19 pandemic and its after effects. The county has remained strong financially. In fact, several of our revenue categories continue to see record growth. While our revenues have continued to be resilient post-pandemic, the county is also experiencing significant pressures on the expenditure side of our operations. Inflation continues to impact the cost of supplies and materials needed for county operations. Coupled with supply chain shortages for many materials, these factors have impacted our ability to perform our daily responsibilities and challenged us to develop new ways to meet those requirements. Our county employees have been steadfast in providing a high level of service on behalf of our citizens, but they are also feeling the impact of inflation in their personal budgets. The county's employees are the greatest asset this organization has, and I am committed to providing additional support for them in the upcoming year. With the recent reassessment, the value of 1 penny of real estate tax revenue is now approximately $1,175,000. The revenue-neutral tax rate, adjusting for a 1% increase in value to cover the cost of the reassessment as allowed by state law, is 70 cents per $100 valuation, a decrease of 19 cents from the current real estate tax rate of 89 cents. For the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget, I'm recommending a real estate tax rate of 73 cents, which is an increase of 4.3% over the revenue neutral rate. The proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 budget for all funds is $239.9 million, an increase of $19.1 million or 8.7% over the current fiscal year. As our Director of Management and Budget, Mr. Magruder, shared with you in a presentation in January, the county expects general undesignated revenue growth of $7.1 million for the new year, excluding any increases in the real estate tax rate. Proposed funding for the Montgomery County Public Schools Operating Fund, net of transfers to other funds, totals $136.1 million, which is an increase from the current year of $9.7 million, or 8%. This includes my recommendation that $4 million in additional funds be provided from the county's general fund in fiscal year '24 to support MCPS operations. MCPS requested additional county funds of $6.1 million to address shortfalls in their proposed budget. Of this amount, $1.3 million is a result of a calculation error by the State Department of Education. Removing this calculation error, MCPS's request would have been $4.8 million, and my recommendation in the budget of $4 million would address 83% of the school's request. I have reallocated 1 penny of the real estate tax revenues previously allocated for future county and MCPS capital construction to special contingencies as part of the budget development. These funds will provide the Board of Supervisors with options to include providing school funding should the Commonwealth fail to provide a funding resolution for this $1.3 million error. It also will give the board the flexibility to retain it in the allocation for future capital or funding other priorities the board may wish to address in the proposed budget. In addition to the 5% salary increase included in the governor's proposed budget for teachers, the Virginia House of Delegates and Virginia Senate have proposed an additional 2% salary increase for a total increase of 7%. As the General Assembly adjourned this past Saturday with no resolution to the state budget, at this point there are no additional funds to address this proposal. If this additional salary increase is ultimately approved, additional funds will be required if MCPS desires to provide funding for a comparable salary increase for MCPS non-SOQ or standard of qualities positions. Again, this translates to another unfunded mandate from our state leadership and creates a significant funding challenge for our schools. Due to the significant increase in the value of 1 cent of the real estate tax rate, as I mentioned earlier, I'm recommending that the set-asides for future capital for the county, currently at 1.5 cents for fire and rescue and 1 cent for capital projects, and for MCPS, currently 2.5 cents, that each of those be reduced by a half penny to 2 cents each. Even with this reduction, the net funding for future capital for both the county and MCPS will increase due to the increase in the reassessed values of real estate. These funds have been placed in special contingencies, as I mentioned earlier, so that the board may have flexibility in using these funds to address other budget needs. To ensure that the county remains steadfast in funding projects that focus on the future, I'm recommending the following funds be allocated for the upcoming fiscal year. The school capital fund, as mentioned at 2 cents, would be bringing $2.4 million for school capital projects. The fire and rescue capital fund, 1.5 cents of the real estate tax rate, would bring in $1.8 million for fire and rescue equipment. The county capital fund, a half cent of real estate tax rate, as well as $1.4 million from other general fund revenues, for a total of $1.9 million for capital and maintenance projects. Other monies earmarked for the county capital fund provide dollars annually for the following: $425,000 for the Auburn Park project. With the grading now complete there, we look forward to moving forward with the final construction of that new park in the months ahead. $210,000 for information technology infrastructure projects, which allows county technology needs to be addressed. $587,716, or a half cent of the real estate tax rate, enables $100,000 to be set aside for future valley-to-valley trail projects and provides almost $488,000 each year for other future county capital projects, and $750,000 for county capital maintenance projects, which allows for the proactive preventive maintenance and for handling large-scale building repairs and replacements. Our county employees are industrious, helpful, and steadfast in their commitment to service to our citizens, all during a time of increased demand for our services. In recognition of their efforts and in an attempt to address the significant impact that inflation has created for them over the past year, I'm proposing a 7% increase in compensation for all full-time and part-time classified employees effective July 1, 2023. This recommended pay increase for county employees matches what is being recommended for state employees and allows us to keep our compensation program competitive so that we can attract and retain the best employees available. Funding in the amount of $2.3 million is included in the proposed budget to address this request. State funds of approximately $400,000 would come in to offset this cost, bringing the net of that increase to $1.9 million. With the Christiansburg Town Council's decision to remove town police officers from MCPS facilities located within the town of Christiansburg corporate limits as of July 1, 2023, board members have expressed a desire to provide funding for the provision of school resource officers in MCPS facilities in the two towns. Funding in the amount of $673,605 is included in the proposed budget to provide salaries, benefits, training, and equipment, including vehicles, for 5 additional SROs to be managed by the county sheriff and placed in MCPS facilities as determined by the sheriff and MCPS administration. In addition to funding for SRO positions, an additional $333,910 is included in the sheriff's office budget for an annual contract for body cameras, the increased cost of fuel, and an increase in motor vehicle purchase costs. The proposed budget also includes funding for the creation of a community resource officer program to be housed at the county government center. The CRO will be a liaison for the sheriff's office and will be available to meet with citizens to discuss any concerns related to community public safety. The CRO will also provide staffing for many of the after-hours meetings of the Board of Supervisors, Planning Commission, School Board, and other county meetings as may be needed. Funding in the amount of $182,752 is included in my proposed budget to provide for 1 full-time position, additional part-time support when needed, and equipment, including a vehicle, to be utilized by the community resource officer. With the implementation of paid first responders for emergency service response in the current fiscal year, the program has seen rapid growth and demand for additional funding. Eastern Montgomery County has experienced a significant decline in volunteer rescue service, and there are times where other areas of the county have a difficult time with volunteers being available to respond to service calls. The county is ultimately responsible for the safety and well-being of our citizens, and we must provide additional funding for our first responders to ensure the safety and well-being of those citizens. For the upcoming fiscal year, an additional $1,358,681 is budgeted to provide 8 additional emergency services technicians, 4 field supervisors, and funding for additional overtime and operating expenses within this area. With this additional funding, the county will be providing resources to fund a total of 21 full-time employees who will be serving as either basic life support, which is BLS or EMT, and advanced life support, which is ALS or paramedic responders. As I've stated on numerous occasions, Montgomery County has been very blessed for many years to have had strong volunteer fire and rescue agencies. Nothing that is being proposed in this budget is designed to diminish that appreciation. The entire purpose of this proposed funding is to supplement those volunteers' efforts in providing the highest level of support possible for our citizens. Other new positions are proposed in the fiscal year 24 budget to address the level of increased services and responsibility in several of our operating departments. In addition to the positions mentioned previously, a total of 4 positions are recommended in General Services, Planning and GIS, Parks and Recreation, and a part-time non-classified position at the Animal Care and Adoption Center is recommended to become full-time. Also, operational costs in the General Services area are projected to increase by almost $700,000 due to an increase in utilities for both existing facilities and the new garage and Office of Election facilities, increased cost of diesel and gasoline for our vehicles, maintenance service contract increases, and one new vehicle to support parks maintenance. While these increased funding needs are for the General Services Department, many other departments are also receiving increased funding support to ensure county departments remain steadfast in our ongoing support for our citizens and our businesses. As a result of the various legal settlements related to the opioid pandemic, approximately $350,000 is available from finalized settlements through fiscal year 24 for opioid abatement programs and activities. As future settlements are reached, this amount is anticipated to increase. While these funds have been identified, they are not included in the fiscal 2024 budget. The county attorney, working with the Director of Human Services and the Assistant County Administrator, are meeting with judicial representatives, local service agencies, and other localities to determine possible uses of this funding. As details are developed for various programs that support treatment strategies, education, and outreach initiatives, the board will be asked to appropriate funding at that time from this allocation to address the impacts of the opioid epidemic in our community. Beginning in fiscal year 24, the county will no longer receive approximately $56,000 in federal funding for the Retired Senior Volunteer Grant Program, known as RSVP. The county is absorbing these costs in the general fund and will gradually expand volunteer programs, to include additional participants and initiatives. Also included in the general fund budget is the Victim Witness Grant Program. This state grant of $210,674 funds 3 full-time positions that will now be included as classified positions on the county's compensation and classification plan. This vital program provides support to victims and witnesses throughout the court process. Once again, I'm recommending funding in the proposed budget of $500,000 for New River Community College's Access to Community College Education program, known as ACE. The ACE program allows Montgomery County High School graduates to continue tuition-free education at New River with their commitment to provide service hours to the community in return. The county has supported students through this highly successful program with a total of over $2.5 million budgeted to date, of which $1.5 million has been expended for services in the program. There are 2 proposed initiatives of which I'm seeking support from the board as part of the upcoming fiscal year that do not require additional funding from the board. The first is to allow the county to investigate the possibility of moving forward toward a reassessment cycle that occurs every 2 years as opposed to the current cycle of every 4 years. Researching the cost involved with creating a Department of Assessment within county government to conduct our reassessments internally instead of contracting this service out would be included as part of that process. If you agree, county staff will devote time and resources to that issue and provide the board with information, hopefully within the fiscal year, that could be integrated into future county budgets. The second initiative involves more closely integrating the county's public service authority into the county's operations. While the PSA and the county work very closely together on many issues, the PSA operates as an independent entity with minimal coordinated effort to integrate land use, GIS, and other county functions associated with the PSA. This initiative would allow county staff to recommend an operational structure for the PSA to be more integrated with the county while retaining an independent PSA board of directors to guide the county and PSA staff on operational issues. I'm extremely grateful to the county's department directors, agency heads, and constitutional officers for their active participation in the budget review process. Our leadership team at the county understands the fiscal challenges that face us, and they respect and adhere to the board's fiscally conservative philosophy. The county's department directors, agency heads, and constitutional officers were part of the review process for these budget requests, and developed a ranking of the departmental request, which I used as part of my budget development. Also, although not ranked by the leadership team, during the development of the annual budget, the county received requests and increased funding from agencies outside of the local government operations, additional funds requested of $828,862. The proposed budget provides a total of $3.1 million to various outside agencies and organizations, some of which are mandated as the county is contractually or statutorily required to provide the funds. During this year's budget process, I've been very blessed to have the assistance of Angie Hill, Brad St. Clair, Mark Magruder, Paul Kaiser, Jeff Raines, Susan Dickerson, Jennifer Harris, and Durley Aguilar in preparing, refining, and presenting this budget information to you. Angie, Brad, Mark, and I spent a great deal of time reviewing, debating, revising, and reviewing again, all the way up till this afternoon about 4:30, the information contained in this presentation. Jennifer and Durley provide editorial feedback and the creative magic that ensures our budget document, presentations, and information reflects our best efforts in communication. The proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget provides funding to address our core local government responsibilities, as well as funding for areas that must be addressed as part of our service to a growing community. County staff and I look forward to reviewing the proposed budget information with you in the days ahead. As I mentioned at the beginning, tonight is simply the presentation for you to receive the information. We're not going to plan to have any discussion on the budget this evening. However, we'll have a work session next Monday, March 6th, for the discussion of the budget. And hopefully, by the conclusion of that meeting, the board will be ready to establish the advertised tax rate and advertised budget in order to allow us to meet required deadlines moving forward. If that occurs as planned, the required public hearings on the proposed budget and tax rate are scheduled for a special Board of Supervisors meeting on Thursday, April 13th at 6 p.m. If that goes as planned, we ask that the board approve the proposed budget at your regular Board of Supervisors meeting on Monday, April 24th. And as we've shared earlier, that's to keep things moving so that we can get the property tax tickets done and issued during the month of May. I'm extremely grateful to you for your leadership and your continued support. I have no doubt that the upcoming fiscal year will be another year of achievement for the county and that our county will continue to be steadfast in its support of our citizens, our businesses, and our employees. Our leadership team members are available, as well as me, to address any questions or suggestions you may have as you review the budget information. Thank you for the opportunity to share that with you. As I said, I didn't want to read every word, but I tried to cover the areas that I thought were important that you needed to know. And with that, I'm going to grab my stuff, come to my seat up there, and turn the presentation over to Deputy County Administrator Angie Hill to review some of the numbers in more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows.
See, we'll even put Marty to work with this. As Mark is pulling that up for me, I would like to echo Craig's appreciation of everybody who helped us put this together. We literally were working on this at 4:30 this afternoon and maybe 5 o'clock, but we want to make sure that we have everything together for you that you need to make these decisions as we move forward. But we really do appreciate all of the teamwork. It's a lot of work and a lot of pieces, and we have different skills and abilities, so it's good to have everybody work on that together. Just to give a quick review, the county budget process starts with base budget targets for personnel, which is based on the current personnel in December or January. We figure out what that cost would be going forward into the next year, and then we cap the operation and maintenance at the current level, and we pull out one-time only items from capital outlay. Then departments request addenda for items that are over the base budget target that can't be absorbed within the base budget. We do analyze that to make sure that there are not existing funds that can cover requests. This year, as you know, we've had a general reassessment, and we're required, as Craig said, to reassess every 4 years based on our size. And state law also requires that if the increase in assessed values is more than 1%, we're required to lower the tax rate to a revenue neutral rate, which is an average for the overall assessment. And if the rate is not lowered to that neutral rate, any increase has to be treated as a tax increase and advertised as such. Again, the revenue neutral rate this year is 70 cents, and 1 cent on the real estate tax rate equals just over $1,175,000 in comparison to the prior year, which was about $904,000. In January, Mark presented information to us with undesignated revenue estimates of just over $6.5 million. Those were new undesignated dollars. As he does every year, he continued to revise his estimates, and we've added about $500,000 to that undesignated new revenue. That came from 3 factors. One factor was sales tax decreased slightly, as we thought it might. The second factor was personal property tax increased a bit. Those pretty much offset each other. And then the third item was the treasurer was able to work with the bank, as Mark discussed in January, and was able to get the bank to agree to fix it, tying our interest rate to the Fed funds rate. And that allowed us to have assurance that we would be able to increase the interest earnings. So we appreciate her efforts in that. The proposed 24 budget included requests from departments and compensation of almost $8 million. And as mentioned earlier, the school operating request from the county is 6.1 for a total of $14.1 million. And as I just said, our new revenue is $7.1 million, so that leaves a shortfall of just over $7 million. And in order to fully fund that, we would be required to request a 6-cent increase. As Craig mentioned, the FY24 budget includes 3 cents as a real estate tax increase, which is $3.6 million in additional revenue. The total new undesignated revenue, as I said, was $7.1 million, combined with a 3-cent proposed tax rate increase of $3.5 million gives us $10.7 million to work with. Those funds are allocated as shown on this slide. The new dollars for schools is the $4 million for operating that Craig mentioned, and then also this is a little bit complicated, but the penny value increases every year as the assessed value does. And this year, because we did take a 0.5 cent out of the transfer to the school capital and also to the county capital, even though we did pull those back, the amount that we're transferring to the capital funds with the pennies did increase approximately $90,000 for the school and $90,000 for the county. So the $4,090,891 includes the operating transfer and a small increase for the penny value. The new dollars for the county, excluding the EMS initiative, is just over $4 million as well. So both of those percentages of the total are about 38%. And then the emergency services cost is $1.4 million. And when we transfer those pennies into contingencies, it moves them between funds. So that put them back into the county operating fund until the board decides what to do with those. But that equals $1.2 million. That gets to the total of 10.7 of new dollars. This is just a graph that we show you every year that shows the increase in funding for schools. So it went from approximately $56 to $60 million from 23 to 24. These major highlights, Craig reviewed those with you. We've just summarized them, and they're summarized a little bit differently than he summarized in the message. Some of them are summarized by category rather than department or operational area. The transfer to the schools of $4 million, EMS services to provide 24-hour-a-day coverage, 365 days a year, which is 12 FTEs, is about $1.4 million. The compensation increase is $2.3 million, and that is offset by about $425,000 in state revenue from their support of the state-funded positions. School resource officers equal to 5 FTE, and their related equipment cost is approximately $700,000. The community resource officer program of $182,000. Then the other sheriff's department increases Craig mentioned for fuel, vehicles, and body cameras of $333,000. Then we combined all of the inflationary type increases in the next category. It's about $700,000 for increases in fuel, utilities, service contracts, and those type things. Additional operating increases include the variety of things that Craig also mentioned for new facilities such as the registrar's office, the 2 new parks, and those type initiatives, and the garage as well. Also, outside agencies, we're recommending funding of $284,000 and then $250,000 for the 5 positions. We'll talk about those a little bit on the next slide. And then again, the transfer from special contingencies to special contingencies from future capital pennies. Again, to reiterate, the emergency services positions, there are 8 full-time EMTs and 4 full-time field supervisors, 5 SROs, 1.5 FTE for community resource officers, a groundskeeper to assist with Parks and Rec with Auburn and Creed Fields, 1 housekeeper to help us with the garage and the registrar's office, a Parks and Rec maintenance worker for a half of the year because the Auburn Park is slated to need a worker approximately halfway through this year. There's a zoning official or a land disturbance inspector that we're still evaluating exactly what department that would go in, if it would go into planning and zoning and GIS or if it would go into general services. It's being held right now in planning, but we'll evaluate that further. And then converting 1 animal care and adoption center non-classified office technician to a full-time position. That's really needed because the staff at the ACAC is stretched very thin and they have to cover for each other, especially on the weekends. The people are working all week and then on the weekends as well to cover that. This is just a summary overview of the proposed budget for '24 by fund and the total dollar increase. The reason the total dollar increase is higher than we've been talking about is because designated revenue is included in this as well. One item that I would like to specifically point out is the debt service shows an increase of $1.1 million. That's not an additional increase that we need to include in the budget. When we issued debt for the schools and we knew that their debt service was going to increase for a few years, we transferred money out of the general fund to the debt service fund to shave the peak of the debt. So that's just using those dollars. It's not going to be funded out of the current operating budget. And this just lets you have something to take with you that shows you what the upcoming dates are. And as Craig said, we'll schedule other meetings as needed.
And Angie, thank you very much for that. And again, the purpose of tonight was just to provide you with this information. I believe you also have your budget books in front of you. That's always a labor of love every year that takes us right up to the day of the presentation as well. So Mark, thank you for all the work on that. Madam Chair and board members, what I'd like to ask this evening is, as you review the budget over the next few days, if you have questions, probably the best thing to do initially, if you can either hold them till the meeting next Monday night, or if you begin to develop questions prior to Monday night, email them to us, and we will use that as our starting point for discussions. Whatever we receive, we'll use that as part of our discussions when we begin the work session next Monday night. And hopefully we'll have some fruitful discussions and by the end of the evening be able to establish the advertised tax rate and budget. And I always repeat that because people think we're moving forward with an adoption. All that does is establish the maximum real estate tax rate and the maximum budget amount that the board is considering for this upcoming fiscal year. You can't go higher than that without re-advertising and starting over, but you can go lower than that. So with that.
Well, Mr. Meadows, staff, Mark, Angie, Brad, Jennifer, everyone, we greatly appreciate all the work that you've put into this labor of love for us. We appreciate the great detail to make sure that we've covered everything that we will go through. And I'm sure supervisors will have questions as we look over this and take it all in. And we do greatly appreciate the hard work. I know staff worked on the holiday Monday, so we do appreciate all the way up to this afternoon till 4:30 to get this ready for us. So we do appreciate that. Thank you. Public hearings. We have 2 public hearings scheduled for tonight. The first is the proposed ordinance to establish a cigarette tax.
Madam Marty, are you going to make any comments regarding the purpose of this public hearing? I'm sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's all right. Well, as the board requested for the county to create an ordinance taxing cigarettes, the proposed ordinance has a rate of 40 cents per each package, which contains 20 cigarettes or 2 cents per cigarette. The ordinance only applies in the unincorporated area of the county because the 2 towns have their own tax. So state law prevents you from taxing in there as well. So the purpose of the purpose of the public hearing is just to advertise the ordinance. The ordinance will go into effect July 1st. So, which gives retailers a few months to prepare for it.
With that being said, we will open up the public hearing. Each person can come forward. They will have 4 minutes to speak. You'll need to state your name and address. We do have a sign-up sheet. The first name on the list is Michael White.
Good evening. I was here last year and spoke to you guys. I don't think it's all the same people, but same topic, cigarette taxes. The company that I work for, MCW Retail Investments, we have 3 stores. We have a store in Blacksburg, which is part of Montgomery County. We have a store in Fairlawn, and we have a store in Bluefield. And what we've experienced at our store, specifically at the Radford store, because they just implemented a $4 tax last January, and we've found that many of our customers are now coming to Blacksburg. Now, currently, the county's not benefiting much from that because you have no tax. I'm here to respectfully request, since it sounds like you guys have already decided to go with the taxes, rather than going with the $4 tax, go with something less than that. Currently, Blacksburg has a $3 tax. Radford has a $4 tax. Montgomery, Pulaski County has a $4 tax. So everybody around us has $4. Blacksburg has 3. If we went for 2, that means that you guys are going to get extra income above and beyond what you budgeted based on how many cartons of cigarettes are sold, because you'll keep pulling in customers from outside of this area. Like I said, a lot of our customers from our Radford store is now coming to Blacksburg. They will stop, once they're not saving $4 a carton. They, if you went with $2, they'll still be saving $2 a carton. But if you go with the maximum, which $4 is the max that the state of Virginia will allow municipality to collect, you're going to push customers away. They will drive. Our store in Bluefield, it's like almost every time that West Virginia does this, WVVA, the local TV station, will come down and interview us. I've been on TV 3 or 4 times. They're talking about this subject because all the customers seem to come wherever the cheapest is. $4 may not sound like a lot to some people for every carton, but it is a lot to many, many residents of our communities. And this is just another tax burden. That's all it is. There's a lot of smokers in the community. So I'm not asking you to go for nothing, but keep it below the $3 and we'll take more money from Blacksburg. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There's no one else signed up on the sheet, but if any citizen would like to come forward and speak on this public hearing, you'll have 4 minutes to do so.
Hey, Greg. My name is Ed McMahon. I'm with the News Messenger. I'm the editor of the News Messenger. Would it be possible for me to get a copy of your presentation? Otherwise, I'm really not going to know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow.
Yes.
Could I get a copy of that, please?
Jennifer Harris, well, they're handing you one right now, but Jennifer Harris, our Public Information Officer, can get you an email copy as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anyone for the proposed ordinance to establish cigarette tax? Seeing no one come forward, we will close that public hearing. The next public hearing, FY 22-23 Budget Amendment, request from Montgomery County Public Schools. I do not have anyone signed up for that public hearing, but if anyone would like to come forward, they have 4 minutes. Seeing no one come forward, we will close that public hearing.
Do you want me to explain that?
Yeah.
Okay. That is necessary because of the amount of the appropriation exceeds 1% of the budget. And so it's for ESSER and other CARES, COVID-related funding to get appropriated into the capital fund.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. All right, we will close that public hearing and move on to public address. This is the Board of Supervisors sets aside time to hear citizens' comments during public address. We have a public address sign-up sheet, so I'll call the names on that list first. Then any citizen can come forward. You'll have 4 minutes to speak. You will need to state your name and address. All comments must be directed to the chair or other supervisors from the lectern at the front of the room. Please begin by stating your name and address. Debate between speakers and members of the audience will not be allowed. Speakers may leave any written statement or comments to the supervisors with the board clerk. Speakers will be judged out of order should they the speaker engage in any personal attacks, use of profanity, or abusive language, or debate between the audience and not address the supervisors. Do not have anyone signed up, but if any citizen would like to come forward, you have 4 minutes to address the board. Seeing no one come forward, we will close public address. Addendum.
No addendum this evening, Madam Chair.
Good. Work session. Do I have a motion to move into work session?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Fitchukowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Board members, this evening we have 2 work sessions for presentations. The first one is a staff update on county capital infrastructure projects. I know in recent weeks, board members have had questions about various projects that the county has currently underway, and we thought it would be easier, rather than sending you a 40-page email, to have Scott come before you this evening and share with you some of the work that's going on right now. And hopefully some of that will also tie into some of the discussion we've had earlier this evening about budget as well. So, Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
All right, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I want to talk to you tonight about 8 projects or 8 facilities. Here's a list of those. It's going to range from the new county and PSA facility to some of the renovations that we're doing, and a demolition that we have planned for the old garage. Talk about the stairwell at the county courthouse parking deck, and some of the new projects that are coming up, as well as just remind you of the former Rhino Rescue Squad facility and what may be coming for that. So the first project here, we have an aerial photo of the PSA and the new Buildings and Grounds facility at the end of Reading Road behind us. The The general services facility is 13,400 square feet, and the PSA facility is 4,300 square feet. It was granted a certificate of occupancy from the town on November the 30th. All departments have moved in and occupied the spaces and are finding their place and workflow process. So, and feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. The second one here is a plan view of the renovations in the county admin suite, where we've constructed 6 private offices, renovating and reconfiguring the work area, as well as the reception area. This project began middle of October, before the holidays, and is actually ready for move-in later this week. The cost on this project was $475,000. The relocation of the Office of Elections, as you know, this location is 1546 North Franklin Street, beside the food line. It's approximately 8,000 square feet, and the renovations include a vestibule and a lobby area that will be very, very similar to the treasurer's office. It will include spaces for cubicles, 2 private offices, a conference room, a large training area, as well as storage for the voting machines for Connie. This project, we intend to move her in the last week of March, and this project cost is $800,000. And then we have the property there on Cinnabar Road with the old garage. We are currently working on an invitation for bid to put this out, to have these structures demolished, and the plan is to reseed the area, topsoil and reseed the area, and then the area in front here is to keep that gravel for overflow parking for events at the Animal Care and Adoption Center. The projected cost is $60,000 to $70,000. We obviously don't have a bid yet, but we will provide an update on that cost at a future time. And then we have the stairwell at the parking deck at the courthouse. This particular area, this is kind of in the on the northeastern corner of the parking deck, and it holds moisture combined with the salt used to de-ice the steps. It has created an erosion issue or a corrosion issue over the years, and we consulted with a structural engineer and decided it'd be best in the best interest of the county to close this to pedestrian traffic. So we have placed signs on each end, at the top and the bottom of the stairs, and we have a project that we've issued a purchase order for, and work will begin in middle of March, 3rd week of March, to renovate refurbish the stairwell, which will include new stringers and concrete treads like the picture on the right here. So this particular stairwell is at the back by the dock over here. We had a very similar situation with the existing stairwell, and this project was completed about a month ago. So it will be very, very similar to what you see in the picture on the right there. The projected cost for this is...
I have a question about that. Will that solve the problem?
Yes, it will solve the problem. We're also looking into less corrosive de-icing agents too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. The projected cost on this is $80,000. So the next one on the list is an update on the new magistrate and court services facility. And we spoke to you back in November, the middle of November, before the Thanksgiving holiday about this project. Plans are being prepared. Geotechnical borings are scheduled for Wednesday to collect data for the foundation design. We have been working through details on the communication requirements with the magistrate and court services staff. Current schedule is to get this out to bid in June or July, so this summer. It's likely that demolition on the former sheriff's office building will occur around September, and the new construction could begin October, November timeframe and anticipating about a 14 to 16-month duration of construction. The current cost in the CIP is 4.7. Just note that that was developed over a year ago, and we have learned through various resources that there's increases in materials of almost 18%, equipment costs or equipment increases of over 5%, and labor of about 3.5%. This to the right is a blow up of the footprint. There, the floor plan of the court services facility, and then the magistrate in the back that would be on the jail side of the building. This is a little bit different from what you saw last time, where the officer's entry would be further to, on the screen, it would be further to the right end of the lower level of the building. This change in the location of the public entrance to the magistrate here was needed because of the grade of the parking lot as it falls down toward the jail. So there was some grade issues, and that caused a little bit of a rotation of how the magistrate's building was laid out. This has been brought to the magistrate's attention, and we went over this with her and discussed some floor plan changes, and they're in approval of that. So the next project I have for you is the new Eastern Montgomery EMS facility. This project is to be located there on the corner of Old Town Road and Route 11 and 460. They're just to the east of the football field there, the Old Town Fields where they have some of the events in Shawsville. This is kind of zoom out picture, and my next slide here shows a zoom in of that corner and a schematic, conceptual layout of how the entrances could be configured, and a structure of about 12,000 square feet is what's shown here today. We are working through the entrance layout with VDOT, and we have a consultant that's preparing a proposal for architectural and engineering fees, and we anticipate receiving that within the next couple of weeks, and we'll get that moving as well. Does anyone have any questions about those projects so far?
On the magistrate building, so you think the price is going to go up, what'd you say, 18% for material?
I'm not saying it'll go up, Supervisor King. I think that it's anticipated it will. I can't give you an amount of which it would go up, but we've been on some webinars here just as recently as January, where we've learned those numbers that I shared with you a moment ago: 18% in materials, over 5% in equipment, and 3.5% in labor.
Well, just my opinion, I think we still need to look at remodeling what we have. That's all I got to say.
Okay. So my last slide is the former Rhino Rescue Squad facility there by the high school. You see the consolidated site there to the right of that structure, and then to the far right is the current rescue squad, and we've got new pavement on the consolidated site as well as in the parking lot there of the Rhino Rescue Squad. But this building, it was constructed in about 2006, 2007, consists of approximately 3,200 square feet. 1,500 of that is in the equipment bays you see there, that second entrance there with the two overhead doors. It was most recently occupied by buildings and ground staff, and we are currently evaluating it for other internal county uses or functions. We had a new heat pump. The outdoor unit was replaced last spring, and some other systems that we need to evaluate are the roof and some of the finishes, windows and paint, things like that. So, and I'll take any other questions you may have.
Well, Mr. Woodrum, thank you so much for the presentation. We'll go around to see if any supervisors have any questions or comments. Anyone? No one? Good. All right. Thank you so much for the
Right.
presentation.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Madam Chair and board members, the second work session this evening is a presentation from Montgomery County Public Schools for an update on the capital projects that are going on the school side as well. And Dr. Whitaker and Dr. Bragan are here this evening. Glad to have you all with us again.
You good?
I think it's right down.
Set that up for you?
Oh, that's not it.
That's the wrong one.
Find it.
Right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
There
no,
you
no,
go.
no, no. That's the Board of Supervisors. That's the other one.
That's last week. Desktop, right there?
There you go. Thank you, Board of Supervisors, for providing us this opportunity. And I'm not sure I agree with Mr. Meadows that it's easier on this side of the dais. I'm not sure. I also want to thank in that budget presentation for the allocation to the school. We really appreciate that, so thank you. At this point, I'm going to pass over the mic to Dr. Whitaker, who's our Deputy Superintendent in charge of operations. She'll be able to give an update on the ongoing capital projects, and then I'll weigh in when I need to.
Thank you so much. I'm short, so I'm going to put the mouse up here. All right. So tonight we are going to provide you kind of two chunks of information. What we want to start by doing is providing you an overview reminder of the funding sources that we talked to you about earlier in this year. Then an update on building projects that we presented to you earlier in the year, an opportunity for you to ask questions regarding those projects. Then we want to provide you an update on Christiansburg High School. Our architect, Josh Bauer, is here with us as well to present to you. And then an opportunity for questions regarding Christiansburg High School. If you'd prefer not to stop in the middle, just let me know. It's just a lot of information, so I thought you might want to stop midway. But if you don't want to, that's fine with us as well. I'm going to say no on the update. There we go. So as a reminder, I spoke with you all in August, and you were provided an update on the funds that were available to us and the allowable uses of those funds. So those were our funds through ESSER, funds that were available from the state for school construction funds, and then the funds that we received from the Board of Supervisors from the real estate tax. Since that time, we have received approval for the funds that we talked to you about for ESSER. We wanted to make sure to get official approval from the government in writing before we moved forward with any of those and brought that to you. We're very thankful we did that, because what we saw is it got kind of halfway through the year and we got some notification of, if you haven't planned to use these funds, then kind of you may need to stop where you are and reevaluate. And so we're really thankful that we were able to get those approvals in and get each project, even though they didn't have to be approved. We wanted each project to go in and get specific approval for those so that something wouldn't change on us later. We would have it in writing. So as a reminder and overview of those funding sources, this is the table that we presented to you when we came in August. That column all the way to the right provides for you the redesignation. So just as a reminder, we had the carryover balance from our 21-22 school year, state construction funds in the amount of $3.15 million, the balance of the real estate taxes from last year. Then we have the 23-year split and the 24-year split as well. The bonds that were allocated by the Board of Supervisors for Christiansburg High School. Funds through CSRLFRF, that's a lot of letters, but those were other ESSER funds as well. And then the balance of renovations from projects at Christiansburg Elementary, Bellevue Elementary, and Christiansburg Primary School. And we would like to thank those of you who were able to come to our school opening events that we had. It was really great to share the schools with the communities. Then we had the balance of the 2.5 cents, the other part from the 2023 split, and then the CARES ESSER funds. So you can see in the original designation column, when we first came to you, we said, okay, here's the undesignated funds. And what we've done now is provided for you where we are designating those funds to. Just as a reminder, because this looks really confusing and going, why do we have all these funds going in different places? You know, those funds have expenditure deadlines on them. And so in order to ensure that we could spend the funds that we needed to on Christiansburg High School, we needed to not be using funds that had a shorter deadline. And so what we wanted to do was identify projects that we could complete within those deadlines and get those done now, and then make sure that the funds that were needed to be available for Christiansburg High School would be there and not have such a short deadline on them. We also provided for you 2 sets of needs when we spoke in the fall. So first was our priority needs. And what we said was, in addition to the current school renovations we had going on, we had identified needs in a variety of areas. So those were safety, roofing, HVAC, exterior, grounds, plumbing, and electrical. And so those were what I don't want to call it emergency, we call them our priority needs. So those were the things that rose to the top of our list. And then we had additional needs from our current renovations that were additional current renovations, but didn't make it to the emergency need, that priority list. So we decided, you know, these were things we still would like to do in those buildings, but had not made it to the level of it being a priority. So what I'm going to do now is provide you an update on each of those priority needs and those additional renovation needs. I want to give you as much information as we can to keep you aware of what we are doing. We've kind of trunked them there. So you can see in the update column, if it's the same update, I'm going to provide it to you all at one time instead of going through each of those items individually. So first, Eastern Montgomery, as you're aware, there is a concern with the water pressure controls for our fire sprinkler system. We have, just so everybody is aware, we have had full-time fire watch in place in our buildings. They are there every day, all day, when any human is in those buildings. And what that means is there is a person who is watching constantly to make sure that the school is safe. That is their only job, and they essentially just walk around. As a reminder for you all, that the system is working. You know, the goal is in those systems to, alarm us and to move forward. But it is not a system where it is not working at all. The problem is with the gauge reading that we are having. And so where we are right now is we thought we had fixed it. So that's why this was a hard paragraph to write, because I did report to the Board of Supervisors or to the school board that we had corrected this. We felt that we had worked in collaboration with the PSA and we had gotten those numbers where we needed them to be. However, we do continue to have additional concerns. We are working cooperatively with the fire inspector as well as with the Public Service Authority to troubleshoot. We had just another meeting last week on that. And what we are trying to do is work on those readings that they have at the gauge, and we're asking for some new calculations to be done. But we continue to work to address that problem together. But I do want to ensure everyone that it is a safe environment, that we are allowed to occupy that building, but that we do have staff in the buildings at all times specifically designated to that. The next set of projects are other fire system upgrades. As a reminder, this didn't mean that those things were necessarily not working. What it meant is the parts and pieces were obsolete and we weren't able to necessarily get what we may need to keep that system. And so what we want to do is address the concerns before it becomes a concern. And so each of those projects was submitted for approval through ESSER, and we have received approval to use ESSER funds for each of those projects as listed. We have issued a PO so that we can begin to move forward with that work. We feel that these priority needs must be addressed immediately and that we needed to move forward with getting that work done. The next is the $1 million that we set aside to address school safety. You may have seen the survey that came out from the schools, and that was just concluded. Mr. Garrettson is working to compile the recommendations. We had a tremendous response from our community. Do you remember the number? It was over 2,000 responses that we received.
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah, I think it was over 2,000 responses that we received. We got a really great outpouring from our secondary students, which we want to hear their opinions. And so as we get that report together, we will certainly be sharing those recommendations. But as you know, we set it aside as $1 million, and we did put that aside for us to be used for those projects. It has been approved by ESSER as well. I'm sorry that didn't note that there. These are the graphics that we shared with you in the fall of the renovations at Bellevue Elementary School and Christiansburg Elementary School. When I was asked to, temporarily step in, that was one of the most immediate and concerning items for me because, I feel like in order to protect the building renovations that we're doing on the inside, we really need to make sure that we have roofs that are safe and sound. And so we wanted to address this immediately. Again, we have put those projects in for approval through ESSER and have received approval for those projects. We are currently in the design phase on those, which means we are getting the designs from architects and looking at the next steps with that project. So that's for BES, CES, and Montgomery Central. At Shawsville Middle School, we had to replace the fascia, and so that's been approved as well through ESSER. We have an industrial hygienist who has evaluated the concerns there, but we are still waiting for their final recommendations. So we have the TBD, but we'll have to look at what those recommendations are from them to fully determine that. Our HVAC priorities are listed on this slide, and so those HVAC priorities at KIPS, Christiansburg Elementary, Bellevue, and Harding Avenue Elementary School are listed in that description section. Again, we have received approval for ESSER for those, ESSER funding for each of those projects. At Auburn Elementary School, we did have to expand the scope of our work. We were unable to seal the pan, which is what we thought we could do to address that issue, and we're going to need to replace it instead. So you can see that number in red is an increase from what we had shared with you in the fall. And much as Mr. Woodrum has shared, you get an estimate, and as soon as you get it, it does change. So we are trying to provide you the most up-to-date information, but also want to, let you know as we use an estimate until we get an absolute number locked in, those can change. Our building exterior priorities at Bellevue Elementary School, the loading dock was not sufficient for our school nutrition staff to get the materials off of the shipment trucks, and so we needed to expand that and make that a larger space to keep our staff safe and also ease their work and make it a little bit faster for them within that kitchen. So we have submitted a PO from the existing funds that were allocated to Bellevue Elementary School. For Eastern Montgomery Elementary School, we had the leaking wall flashings, and so that project also was approved through ESSER funds. The design is complete, and we are at this time preparing a bid package. For our grounds priorities are the repair of the concrete steps and the sidewalk annex at Shawsville Middle School. That was approved through ESSER as well. We're in the design phase. Auburn Elementary School, parking lot and access road paving and seal coat. The Eastern Montgomery High School athletic track, and then all sprinklers that we wanted to do to have both. Some schools, the baseball team had water, and some schools, the softball team had water, and so we wanted to make sure that at schools both teams have that on the field. All of those projects were denied through ESSER funding. They said that those would not be allowable or approvable through those, so we have those projects on hold. I would also note we are working to address the Eastern Montgomery High School. We met 2 weeks ago and went out on that track and walked it and are getting estimates on a full replacement. That full replacement would be higher than the $257,000. But as I've looked deeper into that, it's not something that can just be fixed. It is going to have to be completely removed. The cracks go down significantly into the track, and so it will be a much higher amount than what is on the sheet. But at this time, that project is on hold, but we are getting the information we need so that we can figure out how to address that. In terms of our plumbing needs at Montgomery Central, we need to replace the water lines. That project was approved also through ESSER, and so we are in the design phase on that project as well. Electrical priority at Eastern Montgomery High School was denied for ESSER funding. We were not allowed to use that to replace the lighting in the auditorium, and so we're going to put that on hold and look for other funding as is available to address that need. The next set are still within that first set before we get to our questions, but these are the ones that in the current renovations at Bellevue, Christiansburg Primary, and Christiansburg Elementary were additional needs, but not items that rose to the priority list. And so we have those needs listed there for you. The 6 that you have at the bottom are the ones that we have moved forward, which means the other ones are ones that are on hold for us right now. And so the operations center, those 3 buildings, while I say they were moved forward, they're actually on hold in a move forward. So I didn't want to provide something different to you all than I had to the school board when I gave this presentation, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute for you. Then at Bellevue Elementary School, installing a playground on the campus there. Montgomery Central, as you know, when we renovated the garage into the bus garage, we took the children's play space. And so adding an outdoor basketball court that they could use would also give an extra court to the community as well. And then additional parking at Christiansburg Elementary School. They did not plan enough parking spots for all of the staff members and community, and so we need to add additional parking into that building there. So the current renovations amount on those for Bellevue Elementary School was, I'm so sorry, this has the other projects at the top, doesn't it, still? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, one second. I apologize. The next slide does have the amount on there for the painting. The playground is $100,000, and so that's to come from the existing process. The paint and the interior doors are ones that we are looking at doing it internally, and I apologize that on the slide before they didn't get moved down. Christiansburg Elementary School, again, this has those parking areas and then the painting of the exterior doors and windows. And the same thing as well at Christiansburg Primary School. This is a graphic for you of the operations center. So when I said a minute ago we had moved those forward, but they're also on hold at the same time. And so as a reminder, the graphic on the right is a drawing of what the plan for that parking lot had been. And so the red buildings you see were proposed new buildings. When I stepped into the role, those buildings had not been planned for at such time. You know, I kind of said, where are we on the projects? What else do we need? And these were the items that we needed. So we needed to have a fire-rated building for our fire-rated, not necessarily a building, but location for our tires to be stored in. And then we also needed buildings to address our warehouse storage needs. So you may remember we sold the Cambria property and then we rented it back. And so if we had continued renting that property after December 1st, it was going to be over $300 a day for rent. And so we needed to find somewhere else to move our buses to. We also have storage that has been rented out through the end of this year. We have a contract for next year at Scattergood that we can continue. But after that time, that price will increase significantly, and we have a lot of things that we need somewhere to store. So those buildings originally have been planned to be put onto the Operations Center parking lot to be used for those storage. And so you can kind of scroll down here and see that first paragraph talks about the needs that we have discussed. We did from the contractor who was doing our parking lot. If you've driven by and seen those big yellow, they are not slides in the parking lot, though they look like they could be fun. Those are for our water retention system. And so we received on February 7th, or February 1st, a request for an extension, which was to have been completed on February 10th. On February 7th, the school board voted to deny the extension and terminate the contract for bid 22-04. On February 13th, we met with the town of Christiansburg staff to talk with them about our next steps to ensure we were in compliance with our water retention requirements, and also then to talk to them about what our next steps would be. And so we will move forward with completing the stormwater retention and paving at this time with someone who is on a state contract. And then as we continue to reassess the needs of the school board and whether or not we would put those buildings at that location, we would come forward to you. At this time, we are putting those buildings on hold until we finish reassessing our needs and can bring another recommendation forward. Okay, and so that's just, it kind of shows you that we have rented a property, we have put the buses and the supplies that I discussed from the Cambria locations on that property, and we will continue to assess our needs as we move forward. We are also going to be holding our bus charging stations that we spoke to you all about. We want to assess whether or not the electrical buses are working for us, and we do have 4 charging stations in our communities. And so at this time, adding 4 more in is not a necessity, and so we want to wait to do that to see whether we want to purchase more electric buses down the road or if we want to continue with our regular diesel buses. And then the basketball court is being completed this spring when we complete our paving at the operations center. This is the same slide from before, but I've been talking a long time, so I thought you might want a reminder of where we had reallocated those funds to. And we'd be happy to address any questions you have.
Dr. Whitaker and Dr. Reagan, thank you so much for the presentation. We'll go around the room to see if supervisors have questions. Well, I have a couple questions, and I know some of this funding that you've presented is also what we're going to be voting on and what the public hearing was about. So maybe we could just go, so I don't know if you want to answer those questions now since they are a part of the slide, and that might save us a little bit of time when we have discussion for the vote for the appropriations. Just had a couple questions on the ESSER funding. Sure. Let's go back. Let's go back. I'm sorry, I didn't look at the numbers as I was going through here.
How do I make that go? No, there we go.
So part of this is what we're going to be voting on tonight, the carryover, the construction, school construction. And these are going through Christiansburg High School. And I think that is going to be about $5.6 million that we're going to ask to be appropriated for Christiansburg High School. What the public hearing was on, the carryover, the state, then the real estate tax.
Yeah, let me pull up my other sheet with the numbers on it.
The question is, what are those renovations going, can you give me some detail on what the Christiansburg renovations are since we didn't have a?
Christiansburg High School?
Yes,
we are going
high school, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. We are going to, after we're actually going to do a full presentation on that piece in just a second. So we were
That's
just,
next, so I'm jumping ahead, so I apologize.
So we've got pictures and all types of stuff to show you with that, yes.
Very good. So that was a question, so you'll answer that with the presentation on that. And going back for the Christiansburg, the renovations of Christiansburg Elementary, Bellevue, and Christiansburg Primary, you kept saying original funding balance. Does that mean from the original amount of the $30 that was originally allocated for the renovations, that is the balance of that?
I want to make sure and look at Katie when I'm saying that correctly. It was the original allocation, correct? Let me get her up here. Hold on one second.
And I'm looking at the 867,513, and I apologize.
Oh, you're fine.
That's going to be from the entire amount that was allocated to those projects.
From the original,
They
not
actually
the ESSER funds, correct?
had, correct, that's not any ESSER funding.
Okay, that's the original, that any,
Yeah.
from the 30 million.
Because I get nervous about original just because I wasn't originally answering all these questions, so I don't want to catch myself in something that may be a historical. But it is not any new funds from ESSER that we are putting towards that or any of those new amounts. It is what kind of we had in the pot already.
Yes, ma'am, that answers my question for that. And then back on for the Eastern Montgomery for the sprinkler system, so it is not resolved yet. You're still working a few kinks.
Correct. And Mr. King could probably, if you want to share a little bit with you, but, it is something that we continue to work through on a weekly basis and try to figure out it. It's really a strange thing. It's about a reading. Essentially, you have a plate that says what your pressure readings need to be. And so when we go back through historical, what we see is from the beginning, those readings We're not at that number that was on that plate, but have met the needs of the building all along. They were approved in the inspection for the building, all of those pieces. And so what we're doing right now is we've asked them to recalculate the number, because what we found was when PSA brought the pressure up too high, it put too much pressure on the lines, and so that caused a problem for the community down the road. And so what we believe is that the number on the plate is the wrong calculation. And so what we've asked them to do is recalculate that and see that we aren't already where we're supposed to be, because that is the belief of both Montgomery County, and I don't want to speak for the PSA, but in our conversations, you know, we have tried everything else. We have run lines, we have run cameras, we have tried just about everything there is to try, short of putting in new pipes, you know. And so we feel jointly that that is the next step, and so that is in the works. We think that we will get those recalculations by the end of March.
Very good. And right now, we currently have, is it one full-time, you call it
We actually have
fire
3
watch?
people who work, so anytime someone's in the building, we have to have someone on watch. And so we start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we have our shifts that run. There may be some days where 2 folks are doing longer shifts, but we do have 3 different people who do that for us.
And I'm sorry, did you call them fire watchers?
Fire watch, yep.
Fire watch. And
Yep.
so you're required to have those to keep the building open
Yes, ma'am.
until this is resolved. And then that was an estimate on that cost for just the sprinkler
Yes.
fix.
Yes. That does not
address.
address the staffing at all.
Does not address the staffing.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. And then when we talk about the $1 million for security, and I know you have badges and cameras and entryway, but then watching your board meeting and the preliminary of the safety surveys, I think the number 1 was school resource officers dedicated to each school. And I think number 2 was badges and entry, and those are preliminary, I know. And then the third was for metal detectors.
I would have to see the exact results, but I believe that is.
And so this $1 million could not necessarily be those things.
Not
It
for
could be
staffing.
what the board.
Yeah. The money, do you want me to go?
I was just going to say this, as Dr. Whitaker said, the school safety survey was completed. Jason Garrettson is planning on doing a presentation at our board meeting next Tuesday, I believe, and we'll have all that, delineated on what was number 1, number 2, number 3 across different areas.
Very good.
But in terms of those funds, the ESSER funds are limited, so you wouldn't be able to use them for a recurring cost, and staff is limited in some positions you can use and others you couldn't. When we put those 3 items on there, that was going, we know items like this might be needed, but that the plan was to assess the needs of our community, get feedback, and then decide from there what we would do.
Yes, ma'am. And could you tell me how much of the ESSER funding that you currently have?
As a balance, I can get that for you. I can ask Ms. Miano to pull that for us while we're talking about Christiansburg High School.
Very good. Thank you. Any other follow-up or questions?
Which was unallocated, isn't it all allocated?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can put it right
Don't worry about it.
here. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, first I'm going to ask Mr. Bauer to come up because he is an architect and he does a much better job speaking about his drawings than I did. There you go, look.
I'll sneak in here? Yeah. Excellent. Good evening, everybody. I am Josh Bauer. I'm an architect with Crabtree Warbaugh Associates out of Charlottesville. And tonight we're going to be going over the update for Christiansburg High School. The board, when we were engaged for the project, the board asked us to look at several items to address with the school. One of them was increasing the class size to get us closer to DOE standards, to increase the capacity of the building so that way as projections are showing, we're seeing more students coming to Christiansburg High School. To increase daylighting. For those who don't know, the Christiansburg High School was originally constructed in the 1970s, early 1970s, which was not the most awesome decade for architects. We didn't do a lot of great things. There's a building's pretty monolithic, and I think like 5 classrooms right now have daylight. So we want to really make some improvements. We want to look at really giving the building an identity on Independence and or North Franklin, improve safety and security, and also the overall flow of the building. All right. So this image right here is kind of a blow up at the front entry. of the proposed front entrance is a rendering, kind of showing what on the lower portion. Let me do this. On the lower portion here would be the front entry with the administration. The upper floor would be the media center, and then we'll go a little bit into more detail as we move on in the slides. Okay, so this view is standing with just behind us would be the Friend School. So it's right there at the intersection of Independence and North Franklin. Would be just to our back. Off to our left would be Independence. So this would be the addition. So you can see right here is this would be the classrooms along with the front entry to the building. One of the goals is that as you're turning from North Franklin onto Independence is really to make the front entrance more identifiable. For those who've been in the building, it's not super awesome to say, hey, this is where we're supposed to go. So we want to make it really friendly for visitors, for parents, and also figure out a way that we can kind of connect both the bus drop-off and the car drop-off. You can see just off to the right is the existing building, which is kind of the CTE space, which is shown right about here. Okay. So this elevation, again, this is the proposed elevation looking from Independence straight on. So we're going to go from the left to the right. So on the left-hand side would be this is the auxiliary gym on the upper level, kitchen below, then your dining room. This would be that front entry. On the lower level is going to be your entrance and the administration. Upper level is the media center and the guidance for student services. And then this is the classroom wing. So part of the goal was to really kind of give the building a new identity. And I said, if you look at the building as it is now, it's very monolithic. It's kind of one color brick. And what we're trying to do is try and intentionally break up the facade to make it a little bit more interesting as you're looking from Independence. So now we're gonna hop to the aerial. So this is the site plan. So we're going to talk a little bit about project cost. You've heard just a little tiny bit about how we've seen costs increase. You know that from the gas pump to milk to eggs. And we don't talk about eggs right now, but a lot of things have gone up in the last 2 months or in the last 2 years. So as we've gone through our cost estimates and working with the construction manager at risk, what we've done is we've made large strides to evaluate the scope, to make things more efficient. And see how we can take the design and just kind of take it to kind of the next level by reduce costs. So Independence is here across the bottom of the screen, and North Franklin is on the right-hand side. So one of the things that we're trying to improve on the site, if you are a parent or if you've been a visitor, is there's a little bit of existing wise with buses and car drop-off. So one of the things we want to try to do is really define in the new design on the difference between the car and bus drop-off. So as you're coming down Independence, as a car drop-off, you would enter and be able to come down through here and drop off your student here at the entrance. The buses would come down and be able to enter in here, and they would also be dropping off at the same point. What this does for us is in the morning and also in the afternoon is that all the students are coming in one point of the building. It makes it the easiest for security, for safety, and also for staff to be able to manage that. In the afternoons, we have the Chevron-style parking for the buses, and the car drop-off would be the same. Probably the biggest difference from the last time that we presented is that the addition really kind of connected over into CTE. The addition was almost twice as big as it is now. And we had a lot more improvements and a lot more parking on this side going over on the North Franklin side. And also we had additional improvements on the kind of the back of the building. Since our design that we did in June to the design that we redid in December, we reduced the overall site by about 60%. So again, what we try to do is rethink about how we're going to make the site still safe, still have good flow, but try to reduce the overall costs. So let's hop into the building. So this is the first floor or the main level. So again, going from left to right. So the red line right here is just to the plan south of that, or the bottom side is going to be the addition. Plan north is going to be the existing building. So here we have the cafeteria, which is the kitchen and the food court, the dining room in purple. So this is the entrance, along with administration and nurse, and then this is the math classrooms. So if you remember in the past, we had the classroom wing went down and then connected all the way over into the CTE space. We've reduced the addition by about 40,000 square feet by redesigning the entire interior of the building. As we go, let me finish this. So, and the existing building, the team rooms and the locker rooms are going to remain below the main gym. Then we have special education in green, along with the business labs, the auditorium, which will remain in its current location. And one of the things that the board also asks is, can you really do a good job of improving adjacencies and make sure that programs are really adjacent to the spaces that they need to be? And really one of the fantastic things we'll be able to do is amplify the performing arts by having the auditorium, which is located here, and then all of the red is your band and choral, and all the spaces that really have an integral impact on the auditorium are directly adjacent to that, which makes a significant improvement in the overall flow. And that's from everything from spectators, from the parents visiting to the students. As you go to the upper level, again, the red line represents the addition versus the existing building. So going from left to right is the auxiliary gym, which connected directly to the main gym. This is the cafeteria. Then we have the media center, the student services, and then English is on the second floor. So as we now go into the existing space, the green is science, the blue around the perimeter is the social studies, and then the remainder of this blue is the CTE spaces, the career technology education spaces. One of the things that Christiansburg High School excels in so many different ways, but the CTE program is absolutely phenomenal. One of the things that we're super excited to do is not only improving the current labs, but also amplify and increase the number of lab offerings that they have. Because many of the programs have a waiting list. So not only do we have the lab space, but then also not just one, but 2 classrooms for each one of the labs. It's super exciting. So over the last several months, we've been working on some cost reduction items. Again, that's redesigning the entire existing building to make it more efficient and put more classrooms in those spaces. And you saw that the science and the social studies spaces, and also make the CTE not only amplify, but make it more efficient. We reduced the addition by a little over 40,000 square feet. We also looked at redesigning the entire mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems to make it more efficient. We redesigned the exterior elevations, looking at available materials, and also trying to make it very complementary to the existing building, because we are going to see more of it in this current design. We reduced the site impact by about 50%. And again, we've specifically sought by talking to subcontractors what is more readily available, whether that's masonry, whether that's metal panels, the roofing materials. We've had a lot of intimate conversations with contractors to make sure that we're providing materials that are cost effective and readily available to meet our overall timeline. So,
So just to kind of give you the current status of the project, and then we'll provide you an opportunity to ask questions on it. On December 7th, 2021, we were approved, as you know, to put forward an RFQ related to the construction manager at risk site. I just wanted to provide a reminder of what a CMAR is, because it is a different way of building buildings. And so I just want to remind the folks that the CMAR is a project delivery model in which the owner hires a CM, construction manager, to oversee the project from design through construction, closeout and delivery, with a guaranteed maximum price, which is a GMP, which is provided by the owner prior to the start of the project. That total price, the GMP, must include the construction cost, which are the site building equipment, general conditions, contract management fees, and permit fees. It must include the design, so architects, civil, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, structural, all of the engineers must be paid. The furniture, fixtures, and equipment, so that's the desks, the things, the technology that will be in the building. And also it needs to include some money for a change order allowance that allows us to plan for unanticipated events and have the money that we would need available to address them. So we have received 2 cost models to date through the CMAR process. We received one in August and we received one in January. You heard Mr. Bauer share with you the difference in the project. From now to then, I do want to ensure you that we did not cut out things. What we did was we maximized spaces. We cut out on empty spaces. If there was maybe someday people will collaborate together in this hallway where there is nothing. We put a classroom. Because we know how teachers behave in rooms, and they like to be where they can focus and be with their kids. And so those empty collaborative spaces sometimes don't get used. And so what we wanted to do was make sure we were using all the spaces within our building. And so what you see here are the two cost estimates from August and January. We wanted to provide it to you this way. We did receive them in different formats, and so we had to kind of take the first format and the second format and try to make them so that we could make those two different costs comparable. And so you can see that we reduced from 128 million to 116 million. One thing of note there is that change order allowance dropped from 10 million to 4 million. So 6 million of the dollars recouped in the second numbers that we got were really on that change order and not on the work that we had done to reduce the size. So that's just an important number. It would really look more like 122 if you took that change order back to the 10 million. And so we brought to our board this information, and our board did vote on February 21st to terminate the contract for RFP 22-05. And what that means is that we will proceed with putting the project out for bid. So we will take those design documents, we will put them out to bid and move away from the CMAR process, and we will put that project out to bid so that we can see who can provide us with the most reasonable cost to build Christiansburg High School. Our next steps within the schedule, the architect and engineering team will proceed with their construction drawings. We'll continue meeting with teachers and staff to ensure that our plans are meeting their needs. We're going to provide options to the administration and board on other cost reductions that we may find. We work with the town of Christiansburg on the site plan approval, submit drawings to the code official for review and approval. We will have a public bid period for the general contractors to submit their bid, and a construction period of 34 to 37 months. What questions do you have?
Supervisors? Supervisor DeMont.
Just to make sure that I understand, so we're moving away from the guaranteed maximum price model. Were you just not getting any traction on people taking that up, or?
Oh, wait. It's a great question. Probably should have answered that ahead of time. Coming in as superintendent in December and January, working with Dr. Whitaker as the deputy superintendent in charge of operations, who was getting up to speed on all our current projects. We really wanted to wrap our arms around a $100 million project and try to figure out what's going on. So Dr. Whitaker and I delved deeply into the project and tried to gain an understanding of it and set up a meeting on January 18th, I believe, with the company, which I will not mention, to talk about it. And we were very, at least I was very uncomfortable with the information that was provided, and being able to come to you and the taxpayers and advocate for the project and saying that, yes, I'm confident we're going to be on time, we're going to be on track, and we're going to be within budget. A lot of information presented to me. I have some experience building, although not in Southwest Virginia, so I know things are a little bit different. They didn't seem kosher. The numbers didn't gel. They were talking about estimates of $280 per square foot of completed project. You can't do that anywhere for that, not even in Southwest Virginia. We left New Jersey, it was $410 a square foot, approaching $600. So we had some significant concerns, and as Dr. Whitaker and I asked the representatives from the company these deep questions, like contingencies. That's not significant for a $100 million project to have $4 million in contingencies. 10% is standard. That proposal didn't include any soft costs. I guess we're going to come back to all of you and plead for furniture for the kids to sit on and tables. It wasn't well done, and I'm new. I just came in, and I wanted to make sure our Board of Education had that information as well, because, I own it. I'm the superintendent. You're going to be coming to me and saying, hey, Bragan, why didn't you do this? And you should. That's my job. So we brought that to our board, school board, with some significant questions. We contacted our board attorney, and we have legal standing to terminate the contract legally. And we thought, rather than come to you 6 months from now and say, hey, I don't know what's going on, to do it now and to go out with a guaranteed price in that we use our architectural plans, we use what we've had done now, and put the project out for the total bid. I'm not familiar with working this way, but if we said to, Supervisor Damas, your company's going to do this project, you put in a bid for the whole thing from soup to nuts, including soft costs for $110 million, that's what it costs. You're not going to come to me 6 months later, unless there's an extraordinary change order, right? You find, 10 feet of asbestos or something silly like that. That's what we wanted to do. So we brought that to the school board. If I say the Board of Education, just kick me. Our school board, and they took action on that, and we sent 2 letters to the company stating our intentions, and that's where we are right now.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the explanation. I want to just make a comment, Dr. Whitaker, when you were the interim superintendent, you introduced an openness that I hadn't experienced previously. It's really great to see that that's being continued. This is really a whole lot more information than I remember receiving in my time on the board. So thank you, and thank you for continuing to embrace that.
Does anyone else? Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Yeah, in the transfer tonight, there's 5.7 million going to the high school. What's that going to cover? The HVAC?
Well, so that would go into the total budget for the school. So those are those local funds you're talking about? Or are you speaking to the CSFLRF?
School capital funds. Christiansburg High School renovations. This is from...
No, you're good right here. I just want to put it.
That was the same question I was asking for.
So you mean specifically what? It would go, yeah, to this, to the overall budget, the $100 million budget that is set for the school. Is that what you're, hold on, let's go here. Right there, that one, right? Is that the one you're speaking to? Or you're speaking to the appropriation letter that's attached on the other
the letter.
piece?
It's, yes, yes. So it is the carryover balance of 714 plus and the 3.1 million. And then the real estate tax of 1.9 to give us a total of 5.7. Is that, Supervisor Fidzikowski, what you're talking about too, that we're going to vote on tonight?
Yes.
So I guess I'm confused. It's for the yeah. It's
All
for
right,
the budget for the
You don't
school?
have a bid on the school construction. You don't have one.
Correct.
But 5.7 million that you're requesting is going to go for that. Is that what you're saying?
It's because you had to reallocate that ESSER money.
Yes,
they
to
had-
move those
so
those
switched it
funds.
around?
Yes. We were moving the funds so that we didn't, thank you.
You're
I didn't
welcome.
understand the question. So that those ESSER funds didn't expire before we got to the end of the project. And so that's why we switched the ones and got approval through ESSER for those, and then used the other funds that are listed at the top for Christiansburg High School because they didn't have the same deadline on them.
Okay. Yeah, and I appreciate, Dr. Brigham, your explanation of trying to get all this stuff straight. I don't know if you've heard the history of Christiansburg High School renovations and the numbers that we have been given for the last several years. And yeah, we understand that the longer you wait, things do increase, but I think this is a new all-time high now. So we've already jumped from, I think at one time it was 70 million to 85 million to 95 million. 110 million, back down to 95 million. It's just been all over the place. So that's my concern whenever we talk about the high school. And we already borrowed the money. I don't know if our pockets go any deeper than that. So good luck with that.
Supervisor Fidzikowski, hopefully I didn't mess that up too bad. I understand totally, and believe me, as the new guy coming in, the last thing I wanted to do to come to all of you and say, hey, we got a problem, and we got a board on what we're doing and look to go in a different direction, and it may cost more money. But my fear is, if we didn't do that, and we weren't totally transparent and shared that information, I'd be coming to you in 6 months with some kind of story and making something up, and now that would be on me. So when we looked at it, we went over it closely. I can't speak to what happened in the past. If I can go back in time, I probably wouldn't pick today. But Dr. Whitaker and I we talked with our school board and said we have to be totally honest, and hopefully from this point on, the candor will be there, and that if we go out for a price, hopefully it comes in that area, I don't know that then that's it. We're locked into it, we're moving forward, and we're not having these conversations moving forward. I hope so, but believe me, this is the last thing I wanted to bring to the Board of Supervisors in, 3 months since I'm on the job. But I don't think we had a choice. It's really honest. It's, the truth as I see it, and I felt compelled to share with our school board and all of you.
One last follow-up, because I think in the past administration, one of the issues was that there weren't enough people involved in administration that knew what was going on. In other words, checks and balances. How many people do you have involved in this project?
So we have large meetings. We have our CTE folks, we have our project managers, so we have 2 project managers in-house that were not allowed in any of the meetings previously. So they are involved in all of our meetings. We also include our central facilities staff when they are needed for things that would be upgrades or mechanicals. I'm at those meetings. We have secondary education is at those meetings. The principal is at every single meeting. So we have worked really hard to make sure that we have the right voices at the table. And now that Dr. Bragan is here, of course, he's at those meetings as well.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Biggs.
I want to, first of all, thank you for the whole presentation, and may we get a copy. And I just want to say that I'm thankful for the open communication that I've been seeing over the time, and I will specifically say the last 3 months. And I think it's really important because I think what's happening here is because of the honesty, because of bringing the facts, whether we might make us uncomfortable or not, they're the facts. And that helps to build up the trust. So I am really thankful that you're here tonight and you've brought the information, and I'm looking forward to the continued back and forth. So thank you very much. Oh, and another thing, I'm really glad you're going to go back and ask staff about the proposed plan, because I was specifically sort of going to the classroom size. I know that was an issue at Blacksburg High School. So I'm hoping that the classroom size is going to be something that the staff and the teachers think is good.
And we did also, I can't remember, the months flow together nowadays, but I think about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, could have been longer, we did a presentation to the faculty. So we had Mr. Bauer come and present directly to them, which hadn't happened in some time. But you spend your life at your job.
Right.
And so, that does make a difference. I'd also echo what Dr. Bragan said, when that last bid came in, my stomach dropped. It was not what we wanted to bring forward and speak with you all about, but we have to do what is right and bring the information you need and make the decisions that are right. And I also thank Craig and Angie for their work with us, because, we really try to stay in communication with them. I know Angie is a great resource for me as well as Craig, and it's that communication day to day, not just here, that really makes us be able to work together for our community.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Bone?
You mentioned windows in most classrooms. It looks like science and music don't have any windows. Is that true?
So what we're trying to do is, and tell me if there's a better way to say this, right, is to bring in on that science level some indirect light that would come in through the ceiling. But yes, they would be, that was some of that reclaimed space, was those were just going to be open spaces. And so we were able to recapture that with classrooms. We tried a lot of different, do we put social studies there? Do we put this there? But the science classrooms have needs that the second level can meet, because you have to do roofing and exhaust and things like that. And so putting them in that location made more financial sense than putting them somewhere else. Is that okay?
Oh. So in addition to staff, have you had feedback from the community?
Well, I don't know if we've done another hearing.
The feedback I've heard is, what's the holdup? What are you waiting for? So.
Well, I'm surprised that the feedback isn't, you just took away 40,000 square feet of educational space.
Yeah, and I think the reason is because we did not cut classrooms. We cut spaces. Most of them, what we did originally is we went through and I went, "What is this for?" They're like, "We don't know." I'm like, "Okay, what is this space for?" "Well, it might be for this down the road." "Okay, well, what is this open space?" "Well, someone might come here and bring their class to sit in the hallway." And so we started by going through spaces that weren't being used to say, let's maximize the learning space. And then what we tried to do is just place things in a little bit in different locations. We still wanted to ensure that we are ready for the growth that Montgomery County is bringing because we're growing. But at the same time, we did not eliminate the classrooms that had been planned. It was things that were unplanned that we were removing. So I think that is a piece of the why, and also perhaps because we went to the school and presented to them as well, and have really tried to use our tax dollars to the best that we can.
And at least now we know how to expand the building when expansion is necessary, because Blacksburg High needs to expand also at some point in time.
Yeah,
Thank
they're
you.
about at capacity.
Yep.
I had a question. So what is the capacity of this new, of this
This
high
one?
school?
This is at 1,600.
At 1,600, very good. And I'd like to say, I do like the honesty that you guys are coming to let us know that you had to terminate because there's no way possible that those figures would work, and we don't want to delay this project anymore. A question is, you put a can you go back to the time frame? So when do we think?
So we have 26, hold on, let me go, here it is for you.
Did I see that right? 26
Yes.
to 40-something months?
August
Yes,
of
or-
26. I will say that Mr. Bauer had a closer time frame on that in the original, but until we're a little more sure, I don't want to shorten that date. Our hope and our desire would be sooner, but we feel like it is safer to give when we believe it could be completed by, and then if it's done before then, that would be wonderful.
And I'm sorry, did you say June 2026?
August of 26.
But
Yeah,
still-
right for school opening.
2026?
Yes.
And were there any, certainly when you terminated that, and I understand the reason why that you have to terminate it, what was the cost? Was there any additional cost?
No, ma'am.
Okay, that's good, that's good. And I'm glad to hear about all the involvement and the safeguards to make sure that there is clear communication with everyone, because that's important too, because when you break down communication, you'll get misinformation and then we will have additional problems. So I do appreciate both of you being here and your willingness to come forward with that. When you say classes aren't cut, were the classroom sizes cut? What is the number of students in the
What
classroom
is
sizes?
the classroom size was not cut, and is it 900? What's the square footage in the classroom?
They range from 800 to 1,200.
The smallest is 800, and then some of our larger classrooms for CTE those are 1,200. We also did things like the aux gym, right? We said, let's put the kitchen below it. That was a lot of regained space that we were able to use. And so we just really tried to do what we would do in our home, which is make the maximum use of your dollar and make things as efficient as we possibly could.
And will, I guess after you bid it out, will there be another public opportunity for the public to come? I know that in previous, there have been several public, I wouldn't say hearings, but displays of public input of what originally was going to be to now. So there's just clear communication with our citizens, particularly parents and students of Christiansburg High.
Sure, we'll continue to provide updates to our school board and present to them things as we move forward. We're happy to come and speak with you all anytime that you request. We just like to present to our board first so that the information you all receive is something that we have given to them as well.
Very good. And so for clarification, this money tonight that we will be voting on for the 5.7, it's not dedicated for any particular designated use right now other than to be placed
Yes.
for that.
For
And-
that.
And that is to also help, I guess, what you're doing is because the original 10 million of ESSER funds, because there's a deadline, and now the school is going to be 2026, those have to be used first.
Correct.
And those will address those emergency situations with the roofing and such.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Any other additional follow-up? I'm sorry? Supervisor Bone.
So I pulled up the December 21 presentation, and it showed that this CHS should be finished in 2025. It didn't say when, but so at least it's 8 months beyond that. Can you speak to why?
So the reason I just shared it, Josh would have probably kept that same date on there, and I asked for us to move it because we got to put it back out for bid. And so I would rather give you realistic dates than say, hey, we have to push this 4 months down the road. Our hope would be that it would be done sooner, but because students are in the buildings during renovation, it is a matter of, you build your addition and then you move some kids in. But because it's English and math over there, we may have to move science while we're doing English and math. So it's kind of a game of, put one here, move it here, while you're moving the pieces. It's different than a build from the ground up. And so that provides us the ability to make sure that we can get everything moved. It's just a lot of working pieces, and I felt more comfortable with the extended deadline.
But you knew that to begin with.
We did, but we weren't pushing it back out as we are now, so we just feel it's a more appropriate timeline for us.
How long will it take? How long does putting it back out actually take?
Sure. So we have for you our timeline here. Sorry, I have to look at the picture for you. I'm too old to see that far. Can you see that number? It's green. There you go. May and June. Is that correct? I'm sorry, Josh, I can't see the colors where I am. Go ahead. You can speak. Go for it.
Okay. So the largest impact in the overall schedule is the CTE program. So the challenge with CTE is that we do not want any of the labs to be down at any time because those students are getting their certifications whether they're junior or their senior year. So as we're looking at the overall phasing plan, we really need to focus on the CTE work being done over the summers. So the overall schedule is looking at doing the addition first. So we start with the addition first, and that's going to take about 2 years, 18 to 24 months to complete the addition. And then what that allows us to do is start to move classrooms from the existing building over into the addition. And that's fine for math and English and social studies, but what's not awesome is for CTE. So those CTE labs need to be operational. So our limitation on renovations is only during summer of, really it's kind of not be 23 anymore. It's really 24, 25, and 26 to really be able to renovate those labs. Because we don't have any additional space for auto tech, for horticulture, any of those other spaces. That's why it's extending it to 26, is looking at the overall schedule and how much can we get done over summer 1, summer 2, and summer 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you didn't know that when you put the original time frame together.
So the longer this has been extending, the longer the summers. So it went from, we were planning on doing work in summer of 23, but then we found we weren't really going to be able to do any work in summer of 23 for the CTE. So now it's summer 24, 25, and 26. Originally, it was 23, 24, and 25.
And if I can too, real quick. Yep. And one other thing originally, if you'll remember, we had a lot more renovation. So we had a lot more that we were going to be building up front. And so that's why those people moving makes a difference. When we had those extra, square feet on the building and it was going to be all of those instructional classrooms down there, you could build it, move everybody out, then renovate, and then reshare that space. We can't do that anymore because there's not the space to move them all into at the time.
So you still haven't answered my question. How much time does the bidding out add to the whole cycle?
The bidding itself?
You weren't planning on sending it out for bid.
Correct.
How much time does sending it out to bid add?
Add to it? I want to say it's 2 months, but I'm sorry, I cannot see from here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you're thinking you'll get the bids back by June 2023, and then to actually start on the project, you're looking at?
In July, I believe.
July, is that the gray? Is that what I'm trying to, yeah, a gray, okay. And the overall project looks like possibly 122 million, or the 116,
So that's why we're putting it back out for bid.
in hopes that it will be lower?
Yes. It's a lot, when you look at the two bids that we got side by side, they were in completely different formats. And so it was comparing apples to oranges. And so what we tried to do is take the two different bids that we got and make them something that we could look at in the same way. And it just gave us different questions that we needed to look at and felt like perhaps if there was an edge of competitiveness, that we would get more competitive prices. So when individuals are bidding against each other, there's a competition for that lower price to come in the traditional bid model.
Yes.
Hopefully that won't be our second to least favorite Board of Supervisors meeting when we come back with the actual bids.
Well, and I'll add this to that too. By going through the conventional bid process, once you receive a low bid, or once you receive the bids and you have an apparent low,
That's right.
you do have the ability to negotiate with that low bidder if you need to try to further adjust it. So that's a benefit. So.
And obviously, this board is concerned about the cost, but also we are concerned, particularly since I do represent District B, about how long it's going to take, since my citizens, my students have been waiting since 2019 when this first was talked about, and also to the fact that this board is also took out a loan for $90 million that's just sitting there, and I'm sure that might not say that right, bonds people or whoever are probably not happy that it's just sitting there and we haven't, and we're going to need to wait, but we want to use it wisely, and of course we want to get the best costs. I hate to hear 2026, but at this point we need to find a path forward and to be cost effective for our taxpayers and for those students to move it forward. They've waited long enough.
If I could just say, we appreciate that, and we have that same sense of urgency that you have for all of our students too. That was one of my biggest reservations for coming here today, because since I was in the process of applying for the job, I knew this was an ongoing issue and it's been delayed already. But that sense of urgency, we have it as well. So hopefully, Supervisor Bond, we do get it done earlier than that. We're going to do everything we can to get it done as soon as possible. Yeah, my word on that.
I have another question.
Certainly.
I'm not quite sure how the bond money actually works for us. Obviously, we borrowed at a really low rate, especially compared to the rates now. Where's that money? And is it actually earning any money?
Yes, the bond proceeds are earning interest. They're with the state non-arbitrage program, the Virginia SNAP.
Yep.
I could tell you a lot about arbitrage and interest calculations, but we're allowed to earn a certain amount of interest on the bond proceeds, but it can't exceed a certain amount or we have to pay it back to the IRS because they're tax exempt bonds.
And it's based on the interest rate that we are
That we
paying on
earn.
the bonds. So there's
Compared, right.
Can't earn more than what you borrowed?
You can't earn more than what you paid. It's a complicated
Yeah,
formula,
okay.
but the worst thing that could happen with that piece of it is that we might have to pay some interest that we earn back to the IRS,
Sure.
but it's
We're
not
not-
like we
we're
have to
not
come up with
losing.
that money.
But at
We're
least
not
it-
losing
yeah.
that. But it is important that the funds get spent because the premise behind issuing tax exempt bonds is that you're ready to go.
Right.
So
Right. Thank you.
And I will say that Angie and Dr. Whitaker are having discussions as well. We're keeping our financial folks advised of that as well. They share that same sense of urgency, and we're making sure that we're keeping everybody in the loop on how this project is progressing.
Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
I have a motion to come out of work session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Just a second. Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Stokowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
At this time, we will take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back for items of consent.
Wore out.
Zoom. Have a motion for items of consent.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
New business. First up, Montgomery County Public Schools appropriations and transfer. This is for, let me bring up the first one. Oh, I lost it. There we go. This is for the 5.7 for Christiansburg High School.
No.
No.
No,
That's for
I'm at the wrong one. Wait a minute.
1-9.
Sorry.
It's the renovations.
Yeah, it is.
The-
It is.
It is that one, isn't it?
No.
It's 1.9.
1954.
And it's the other as well. It's both.
Yes,
It is the 5.7, correct? Am I correct?
yes, ma'am.
Yes,
It's
it
the
is. Okay.
1.954 and then the allocation of the 3,870,000 from school operating fiscal year and carryover funding.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Blevins? 7 ayes.
All right, next is Montgomery County Public School appropriations for CARES and ESSER funds.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? I do have just one clarification on the roofing projects. Those are for, what you just showed us on the slides, Bellevue Elementary and Christiansburg Elementary, and that will be for those and be complete. Yes, ma'am. Just make sure.
Yes, ma'am.
And that, okay, very good. And that, any other discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next up, ordinance to establish a cigarette tax.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Supervisor King.
Here a few months ago, the majority of the board voted to do away with merchant capital tax, which was a good thing in my opinion. Now we're talking about taxing individuals. And Mark come in front of us, I think it was last month, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but he did say at new monies, we had $6.2 million.
6.5, but that now tonight was 7.
$7 million. That was just that new money. Right here on this paper, I have another total estimate of $908,070. We have got money. I just don't understand why we would even bring this up to tax anybody with the money that we have that's not allocated. I just don't understand it the way prices are now, gas, eggs, everything. Why are we even bringing this up now?
Why are we even considering a 3-cent tax increase? It's because we need the revenue.
It just come over $7 million, not count what I have on paper here. That's unallocated. When this first started, and I'm all for Parks and Rec, but when this first started, it was to give them $100,000. During our last budget session, we give them that $100,000. Now it's $200,000. If they need another $100,000, take it out of this unallocated money. People say it's a sin tax. We're not here to do people's morals. We're here to do what's right for the citizens of Montgomery County. And when we sit up here and show them the money that we have, It is unallocated. I cannot understand why we're even talking about putting a tax on another Montgomery County citizen. I don't understand that.
I'd like to ask for clarification from Mr. Meadows or Ms. Hill about why they have proposed a 3-cent real estate tax increase when we have so much in unallocated.
Well, the simple answer to that is it's to balance against all the needs that were presented through the budget process that the staff went through. And the budget does include $100,000 for the estimated proceeds from a cigarette tax that we have said would be dedicated to Parks and Recreation. But as you heard in the presentation earlier this evening too, even with the recommended increase that we're talking about with real estate taxes, we still were short several $1 million in being able to address all the funding requests from the various internal and external operations.
But can you speak to all the money that's unallocated?
I think, are you talking about how we end a fiscal year maybe and have funds left over at the end of a year?
Right.
Right? So these funds and the 3-cent real estate increase would be for ongoing needs. And that funding at the end of the year is a one-time item.
We always have, we've always used any money at year end to address capital needs or one-time items, not for ongoing expenses.
So right now, it's called unallocated, but it will be used.
At some point, probably, yes.
Well, some of it's used, some of it's used for cash flow, some is for reserves.
Right.
Well, you're talking about a 3-cent tax, real estate tax increase. We ain't even voted on that yet.
I'm not,
But we're supposed to vote on this tonight.
well, the point is if we don't have revenue from the cigarette tax or the 3-cent real estate tax increase, what do you plan on cutting, Supervisor King?
You don't have to cut nothing. You got the money sitting right here.
I'm sorry, I thought we used unallocated money for cash flow, reserves. Are you saying that's not important?
What I'm saying, if they need another $100,000, we can take it out of this money. This is not all we have.
I think that was just 1 year
Right.
end balance amount. And while it's not $100,000 or $200,000 is not a huge amount, I think part of it is the principle. That's why I think Craig and I brought it forward, was the idea that we've asked the state for more ways to provide funding. It's a small amount for us, but it is something that they offered us.
That's the reason staff brought it forward. Is it was, as we've said before, when we've appealed to the General Assembly for more tools in our toolbox, if you will, to raise revenues, the General Assembly finally allowed all counties to be able to levy a tax on cigarettes, and that's the reason several board members mentioned that they thought it would be a good idea to bring that forward. So.
Well, I oppose this tax, being that we just, again, as Supervisor King stated, we abolished a tax for the first time in history for several decades with the merchant's capital tax to be pro-business, to produce the climate. I would not want to put this burden on the businesses nor the citizens. I didn't get rid of one tax to replace it with another. And I do understand that there are needs and the tools that are given to us. Just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should. And so I will vote against this tax, the cigarette tax.
And so the merchant's capital tax that we abolished was how much revenue again? Do you remember?
1.5
$1.5 million.
Right. So the 3-cent proposed real estate tax increase is
About
over $3 million.
$3.5 million.
So that tax increase, that proposed tax increase wouldn't have had to been 3 cents. It only would have had to have been 2 cents, probably, something like that. We're a growing county. We need all the revenue that we proposed this budget, or they proposed this budget as a fiscally conservative budget. It's right in there. They're not, there's no frills in there. Are you, prepared to say what items will be eliminated?
That's the challenge of the board, is for us to decide what we need to cut and what funding. Obviously, there are going to always be more needs than there are money, and that's why we have to use our best judgment. Abolishing the merchant's capital tax greatly benefits us because of economic growth, of keeping businesses here and expanding those. And as we are a growing growing county, our needs are growing as well. But I just don't think putting the tax burden back on the citizen and creating a new tax is the way to do that.
I'm curious what the administration used as a factor for business growth because the merchant capital tax was eliminated in our '24 budget.
The only thing I can say to that is we didn't assume any additional growth other than.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because it's the first year we haven't had the tax. We'll just have to see.
Interesting. You didn't find any research or other examples from other counties that actually had a growth in business revenue and for us?
Again, being fiscally conservative, we did not project any.
That's really interesting.
But backcountry didn't leave Montgomery County, and that was jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So if they had left, we would lose the jobs and also that merchant's tax income.
If, in fact, they would have left. But now we have Parks and Rec for $100,000 in our budget because we were expecting this tax to go through. So are we saying that we don't want the 100,000 for Parks and Rec this year?
But they left the 100,000 in the budget, didn't you? I mean, we're not taking nothing away from them.
We left the first 100 and then we added another 100, so it will be 200 total in the '24 budget.
And we are expecting to have the tax to support that. Right? I mean, that's all that the cigarette tax was going to support.
Right.
They put that 100,000 there last year.
We put 100 last year and then we added another 100, but we did put it in last year and we still ended the year with a surplus.
And it was a one-time money for last year.
No, that was for their budget.
Well, it was a one-time lump sum for our budget.
Because you hadn't passed the ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
But we did include it again this year. So
Right.
this year's got 200,000 in it.
Right, that has to come from revenue, ongoing revenue, which is the cigarette tax. Am I saying that correctly?
You are saying that correctly.
The cigarette tax is paying for the 200,000 for Parks and Rec this year. So if you don't want Parks and Rec to have the 200,000, then we shouldn't pass the cigarette tax. Am I saying that correctly?
Unless there's a different place to get the
Unless
funds.
you're going to get the money from somewhere else.
There's other money they can get.
Not an ongoing money. In one-time money, yes, but that's not what this is. This is ongoing money.
Well, this is a budget session. I mean, that's when you can look at the staff and say, find $200,000 to give Parks and Rec. That's what we're doing now. We don't have to burden anybody for this money. And as far as growth, go down there next to Fallen Branch Industrial Park. It's growing. Companies are coming in.
I think people probably have made up their minds. I would like to call for the question.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Shepherd?
No.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
No.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
No.
4 ayes, 3 no.
All right, next. Resolution to approve participation in proposed settlement opioid-related claims.
So
Motion.
moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
No, aye. I got choked.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
All right, next up. MOU with Town of Christiansburg Parkway Drive Extension.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Reports. County Attorney.
I actually have one tonight, so I apologize if you were looking to leave a little earlier. Well, two things. One, I appreciate you passing the resolution to approve participation. That's the second global settlement. We were involved, obviously, in the first one with the distributors. This is the 5 pharmacy retailers. We'll be getting about $50,000 a year for about 16 years. That's our direct money, and then there'll be some indirect money that we have a right to that goes to the authority, and then there'll be what I call regional money, or money we have to partner with that will also create additional opportunities for us. So it's a good thing. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, as most of you are aware, the county chair received a letter that Erica Connor, the current clerk of the board of the Circuit Court Clerk's Office, has announced her retirement, and that's effective tomorrow, I guess, at 5 p.m. So tomorrow will be her last day. And so under the code, the local government is required within 15 days of the vacancy to petition the court, either for a special election or ask the court not to order a special election. If you're not aware, her term expires at the end of December, so she has about 10 months left. There's a couple code sections that come into play because of that. One is you can't hold a special election at a general election when that term is expiring within 60 days, which would obviously be the case. You also, since it's within a year, you have the option to ask the court to not order a special election. And then the other thing that's in play is, in talking with the registrar today, there's a good chance there's going to be a primary, I believe, on the Democratic side, which really muddies any chance of trying to get a special election date, because you cannot have a date that's the same time as a primary, and the special election would have to be 55 days outside of the primary date. And so that creates a very small window to even hold a special election, and you'd be spending a bunch of money using probably about 40 grand, and then using every polling place for election that someone would hold office for maybe 2 months or 3 months. So what I recommend is that, and we've done this in the last 2 times that this has come up, where we've had a constitutional officer resign within the 12-month period of their term ending. The code has the deputy clerk step in. That's already occurred. Well, she'll actually take office on March 1st. She's already been sworn in effective March 1st. And that's by statute. That happens without your involvement. But then I would ask that you empower me to petition the court to ask them to not set a special election, and that under the state law that you're allowed to ask for that if the election is within 12 months of that person resigning. So Any questions or concerns or?
So clarity, we have to take some type of action, either to say that
Correct.
we're not doing a special election.
Right, and I'm not sure we can even get a special election
Calculations,
date.
you don't have the 55 and the 60 days before
Right.
the primaries, and they would have to be before that.
Correct, right. If that term was ending, say, 2 years from now, the election would be held, the general election.
So
But we don't
Marty,
have that.
do you need a motion then to,
Yeah, motion just to empower me to do the petition and asking the court. And like I said, this is what we've done the last, I believe, 2 times.
Is that what we do on the agenda for the 6th? Can we
No,
do-
I need that right now, actually, yeah.
I'd like to make the motion. that we-
Second.
Yeah.
Motion,
Go ahead with the attorney's recommendation.
motion and a second, any discussion? No discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Chakowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Thanks. That's all I have. I'm telling you, hopefully the administrator only have 1 and not 2 things. Yeah.
Marty, real quick too, on the
Yes, ma'am.
opioid, so right now we have that 350,000 that was mentioned in
Yeah,
our,
so now we'll be at 400, right? That does not include the 50.
and that will be something that's not included in the budget because it has to be used for abatement, but that's something this board can discuss.
But as that working group that has been put together begins to discuss potential uses of those funds, that will come back before you to appropriate funds from those monies.
Yeah, and that's the direct money you control, so long as you use it for abatement. But we can also seek money from the authority,
And that
additional
is-
money.
That's more money too.
Correct.
That's a lot more
additional.
money.
A lot more, yeah, a
Yes.
lot more money, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And then we're starting to work with some of the localities that are in our community service board area. And so I think that's the best avenue probably to reach some regional projects.
Thank you. County Administrator.
Well, I had 2 things, but now I have 3. The first one is, let the record show that tonight, county administrator report will be less lengthy than the county attorney's. Secondly, I was honored last week to be elected as chair of the NRV Passenger Rail Station Authority, so I'm excited about that opportunity. Probably means passing a few more things on to Brad and Angie, because I want to be able to focus a lot of time and attention on that project. That's a huge opportunity for this region, and I'm excited about being able to serve in that role. And secondly, just following up really on what Marty said, next week on Monday, several of us will be attending a regional meeting over in Giles County about the opioid funding, and not only are we looking within the county of how to address that, we're going to meet with our counterparts in the New River Valley over at the Giles County Courthouse and have a conversation about how we can leverage some of those dollars for some regional impact as well. And that's all I have.
Very good. We'll go around to the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Chakowski.
This is something I think I brought up before. I've been getting a lot of contact, maybe you have too, from seniors that take advantage of the reduction in their real estate taxes, and now that the reassessment has kind of jumbled things up, I would like to see us look into that and figure out what we might have to do. And I think, Angie, you were talking about it.
That's correct. Marty and I have been discussing that, and the time frame is such that we need to get it in place for the next calendar year.
So what would that mean for the citizens?
Well, the good news is the new housing values that we're setting now through the reassessment will not be the ones they'll be using.
That's right. You told me that for this year.
Right.
Yeah.
And nor will their income for this year. It's the preceding year.
So we will have time to correct it for the following year.
That's
correct.
We need to do it prior to the end of the calendar year,
I think
effective January 1.
we hadn't addressed this for years because we had met the state limit, but then the state took the limit away about how much you can what the limits can be on the exemption. And previously, when we had brought this to the board, we did it in August, late summer. So I think that's when we'll do that again. We need to work with the towns because we all 3 try to do the same policy, so it's not confusing to the taxpayers. So we'll start working on that as soon as we can.
Yeah, that might be something to bring up at the Greater Montgomery Liaison meeting. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Supervisor King.
No report.
Supervisor DeMotts.
I'm just gonna do another commercial, starting it with a thank you to you, Chair Blevins, for mentioning the senior games at the Greater Montgomery Liaison Group meeting. Montgomery County Parks and Rec is sponsoring the New River Valley Senior Games this year. And senior is a bit of a misnomer because anybody that's 50 and up qualifies to participate. Registration is available now through March 31st on Montgomery County Parks and Rec website. You can pick the events you want to register for. It's a whole wild selection of different things depending on what your interests and talents are. Bocce ball, I'm going to put in a specific plug for that one. That one is said to be the most fun. So adults ages 50 and up, register by March 31st in the senior games. They move all over the New River Valley. The dates that they are held are April 23rd through 28th of 2023. There is no experience necessary to participate. Please do register, and it's a ton of fun. Montgomery County is really happy to be hosting this year. Thank you.
Good. Supervisor Bone.
No report.
Supervisor Shepherd.
Only one thing, I just want to make it official that I will be seeking reelection for this board in November. And I appreciate everybody's support.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank staff for all the hard work on the budget, and I'm glad to see that it's sort of addressing current and future needs. I think that's very important as we plan for the future because the county just keeps growing, and just go down Prices Fork Road and those houses are just popping right out of the ground right next to Prices Fork Elementary. Very interesting. And on the schools, Sheriff Blevins and I went to the Christiansburg Elementary School open house last week, and we were given actually letters from students thanking us for their school renovations. The big hit seemed to be the gym.
Yes.
That's what they really, really liked. So we went to the gym, and sure enough, it's really nice. It's really nice. And so thanks to all the board members. They want you to know that they really appreciate their new school, or their newly renovated school. And that's it.
Just a few things. I want to do a shout out that this week, I think Friday, is that the 3rd, March 3rd, does that sound right? Is Employee Appreciation Day. And we just wanted to do a huge thank out to all of our staff and employees. We really do have the best people serving and working hard, and they make such a positive impact on all of our citizens. And so we just want to do a shout out to all our employees and show, as this board does, we greatly appreciate each and every one of them. And again, it was very cute. It was the Bellevue renovations that gave us all these, the students gave us all these homemade thank you cards. So that really was very nice, and they were all excited. And as Vice Chair Biggs said, the gym was the biggest hit that they loved. And then also wanted to do a congratulations. County Administrator Mr. Meadows and I were able to attend the Lewis Gale Montgomery Hospital new expansion, and that is a great, huge investment, almost $16 million investment here to provide quality care for our citizens. So I would do a nice congratulations out to them. With that being said, we stand adjourned.